Artillery on Parade at Fort Nelson celebrated over 200 years of artillery with an event that included military vehicles on display and some of their historic big guns. Our reporter Shan Robins went to find out more.
Supported by the Royal Artillery Garrison Volunteers, historic artillery from the Napoleonic period through to World War II was on display. Horse-drawn guns such as the Napoleonic 6-pounder, mechanised guns and anti-tank artillery were all put through their paces, with artillery enthusiasts and experts on hand to explain the artefact's importance in history. The Royal Armouries Curator Emeritus was the former keeper of artillery at Fort Nelson for nearly 30 years. He was the project lead for setting up the museum in 1988 and shared with us one of his favourite pieces due to its unique nature.
The vehicle I'm standing in front of is always known as a Sextant because many pieces of military equipment have a code name and it's an easy name to remember. It's technically a 25-pounder self-propelled gun, which means that unlike a towed gun, an ordinary, so to speak, field gun, which is towed behind a lorry or an earlier one towed behind horses, this one has its own motive power. And it's a tracked vehicle, so it's often confused with a tank. But the difference between a tank and a self-propelled gun is the self-propelled gun is basically a field gun, multi-purpose gun, very lightly armoured, but on a tracked base. So the base, the chassis, if you like, is like a tank, but the top it's not got a turret, it's not got heavy armour, but it can carry more ammunition. It's a rapid way of getting a field gun into action.
When would this one have been built and what war might it have seen?
This Sextant dates from late in the Second World War, where the British were very urgently in need of a mobile artillery piece, particularly with the prospect of D-Day coming up and the war in continental Europe. And so the British asked the Americans if they would build a self-propelled gun using the British 25-pounder, which was a superb gun. The Americans couldn't do that, but the Canadians agreed to do it. And this gun was built by the Canadians at the Montreal Locomotive Works, because Locomotive Works for railways had the big heavy engineering capacity to do this kind of thing. So it's a British 25-pounder, but built in Canada and based on the Canadian Ram tank, which in turn was based on the Sherman. The point of saying this is that the Sherman was a ubiquitous, popular tank on the Allied side, so it meant that all the running gear was readily available. It was a powerful vehicle, and it was vital on D-Day because it could serve and did serve as an assault gun, not just as a field gun. They were fired from the landing craft and they could be fired as soon as they were on the beaches to support the infantry attack and to help hold the bridgehead. Something that they didn't really do in the First World War, but they did in the Second World War, is that each gun was like a unit of itself, so that it had what we call local defence. So they'd have a Bren gun, the gunners would have number 4 rifles, the main British rifle, and you've got entrenching tools, pickaxes, axes and so on, so you can maybe clear a way through a very dense piece of scrub.
When the collection was being built up in the early days, the team decided they must have a self-propelled gun.
It's an important part of the history of artillery, and they became very heavily used in the Second World War in the assault role and supporting infantry in advances. And we decided a British one would be good, and the Sextant is a very famous one. And it just so happened that some that had been sent to our allies, Portugal, just after the war, were re-imported. And we bought one of those from a collector and rebuilt it. And it's maintained and driven by 2 technicians here at the fort and brought out for displays like Artillery on Parade.
Demonstrating the power and might of the big guns in action, uniformed detachments fired guns on the parade ground, including 2 original First World War 18-pounders. The salute marked the centenary of the Battle of the Somme. This is Shan Robins for That's Solent.